I am thrilled, excited to have these two executives joining me on stage. First, we have Sangeeta Chakraborty, Chief Revenue Officer at Amagi, where she oversees global revenue and brings a very interesting and lovely perspective on how CX ties into growth. Joining us also is Steve Frost, Practice Lead at SOAR Performance Group, where he's advising companies and building world-class go-to-market models.
Thank you. Thank you.
As we get started here, just like to get a little bit of audience participation. How many of you here suspect that your organization actually drives more revenue growth from expansion rather than landing net new opportunities? All right, a few of you, as really suspected here. So today we're going to lean into how CX leaders are really transforming their every interaction into signals that drive value, loyalty, and more importantly, revenue here as well. So let's kind of start with a big overarching question. Is the old model dead? Judy kind of touched into it. We're not really referring to pre-sales and post-sales organizations anymore. Steve, I know you're doing a lot of advising and benchmarking on this particular topic. What are you seeing across the industry right now?
Oh gosh, I would love to tell you that it's dead. It's not. At least not what I've seen yet. I think there's hope that we can really truly make this one continuous customer experience from the time you're sold the first time to as you've been a customer for 5 or 6 years. But we're not there yet. Systems, processes, KPIs, the data that we share, even just as Mina was saying, the human connection's not there yet, sometimes between sales and post-sales. But AI's got a chance to make that work. And we've finally got the systems and potential to start to make some real change and some impact there. I don't think it's dead yet, but we're working on it.
Sangeeta, what are you seeing from a CRO's perspective and lens?
If it's not dead yet, we have to kill it. Okay? I've been on this mission for the past few years of not letting the word post-sales even exist in my organizations. I think it does a disservice. It's a term borrowed from perpetual software from the 1980s, and the day we started selling SaaS, we should have stopped using it. Post-sales means nothing. Literally, when did we stop selling? So if we haven't done it yet, this is the time when we have to drive. To Steve's point, what keeps us from fixing it is that we have silos in our organizations, and we are forcing our customers to learn our org chart.
Yeah.
What has not changed is how they buy. The buyer's journey hasn't changed. AI or not, they're going through awareness, they're going through evaluation, they're going through negotiations, they're looking at the value deliverable, and they're expecting that through onboarding, through adoption, through support, to become advocates and to buy more. This has not changed. But what we have done is we've created our organizations to map to each one of these stages, and that's got to stop.
And based on the audience participation here too, we saw that there's a lot of opportunity for expansion coming from, and I'll dare to say it, post-sales organizations as well, contributing to that growth.
Don't say it.
With that said then, ultimately, who within the organization are we seeing as taking ownership and responsibility for that expansion number?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, Sangeeta, you've lived this trade-off. What are you saying?
So I would say that, first of all, it's important to design for the right outcome, and it really does depend on your business, your technology, and your buyer and your user. There's a book that both Steve and I like. It's called Atomic Habits.
Yes, love Atomic Habits.
And one of the things that I thought really struck me was he said, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And I took it away as a learning in terms of what systems are we designing that is going to give us the ideal outcome. So I've seen customer success own the expansion number. I have run it myself. I was considered a bit of a maverick to even test it because CSMs can't sell. I've seen customer support own a lot of the insights to drive revenue. And I've seen different variations of sales reps own this. It doesn't matter any longer. I think we have to come together as one and understand that the go-to-market organization owns this number. We have to figure out how to have shared incentives and shared structures to do it. Being in sales, I have to say I expect the account manager to own the number overall, but it should not anymore be the sales does all the selling. That, I think, is something we need to stop doing.
Steve, what are your thoughts on that, and what are you seeing as far as some of the challenges in the ownership model as well?
First of all, I think that was incredibly well said. We've got to, I hate silos. I know that many of you have metaphorically worked in silos. I'm from a small town in Nebraska, so I have literally worked in silos, and they're horrible. They're dusty and dangerous, and people die. Look, just because you're right, the account manager may have the ownership. Revenue is a team sport. And we talk about hunting versus farming, right? Not everybody can be a hunter, but everybody can be a farmer. And everybody can grow customers if you put the right systems in place. And even from a support standpoint, I've seen it. I've seen it happen. Marilyn was up here. I know Microsoft has done amazing things with just letting their support agents be advisors and showing them, their customers, how they can grow and what next steps they could take. At SOAR Performance, we did a project with Verizon where we saw, I think, a 400 and something % increase in revenue generated by the support team, and they even became profitable just by giving people the tools and the systems they needed and empowering them to move off of some of their handle times and other things to help have that conversation where they can grow. And again, that wasn't always possible before AI, but now you've got, I saw that demo, they can have customer insights they've never had before.
Yeah.
And so it isn't like necessarily a training thing. It's, wow, I've got the data right in front of me to actually lead them where they want to go. And it's a really powerful tool that can open up a lot of things that couldn't happen before.
Yeah, no, I think that's a topic we really need to dive a little bit deeper into. And we saw some great insights through the product demo here as well. And to your point, both of your points really, we're asking teams to build on a new skill set and take on new challenges, from driving and resolving customer issues to looking at opportunities to grow. So really think from a practicality standpoint, what are some of the signals that organizations and individuals really need to be focusing on and leaning into to help design those expansion and renewal playbooks?
I'll tell you one thing first of all. I did a lot of research on this, so some of us come from a background at TSIA. I was there for 9 years. And you guys ever see the movie City Slickers with Billy Crystal and Jack Palance? Anybody ever see that movie? Okay, so there's a scene in the movie where Billy Crystal's talking to John Palance is talking to Billy Crystal, says, you got into the meaning of life, what is it? It's one thing. And Billy Crystal asks, what's that one thing? And Jack Palance says, that's what you got to figure out. And what we saw in the studies I did was companies that could concretely tie any adoption-related metric to expansion and renewal increases did so at again, 10 to 15% higher rate. So what's the one thing? And maybe Sangeeta's got some insights on that, but I'll tell you got to find the one thing.
Yeah, so true. This is something that we really have focused on in my prior companies, and we would call it the North Star metric to make it glaringly obvious. But the one North Star metric, depending on the business you're in, Slack, for example, considers it the number of messages any user sends out in a day. LinkedIn is the number of LinkedIn connections that you send out in a day. So every company, if you haven't figured it out yet, you have to figure out what that North Star metric is. The reason it's important is you're aligning now beyond go-to-market. Now product, engineering, marketing, sales, CX, everybody is thinking about how you drive that North Star metric. One thing, very wise words.
Yeah. And I'll add too, from our perspective here, of course, we're seeing a lot from shifts in sentiments, escalation analysis that's driving predictions from a customer account health scores, all indicators of where there might be opportunity or where you might need to drive a little bit more into. And I think we should get into the topic of AI for CX. This is the AI for CX Summit, of course. So what are we really seeing from the industry in a hype perspective? Is this something that is realistic today? What are the elements driving those signals into operational flows? Or is it still very much just hype? Where are we from that reality standpoint?
I'll take a stab at it, and then
Yes,
you can add on to it. Look, we see it, right? 95% of projects fail. They're not making that stat up. It's real. So you've got to figure out that project that can actually be done with it. And that may be back office, that may be something that's customer facing. But I'll tell you this, as you're designing your AI workflows, and you're making, we talked in the last panel about the build versus buy decision, right? Don't create another silo with your CX and support. Because you start thinking about what's customer data. If you're in sales, your customer data might be what's in Salesforce as a CRM. And if you're in marketing, your customer data might be in HubSpot. right? The last thing y'all want to do is create another silo of data and process. Whatever you do, use one source of truth, because those AI workflows are going to have to make calls to, you don't want them making agentic calls to 7 or 8 different silos. It just complicates things. So I don't know where we are in the hype cycle versus the reality cycle, but I do know this: you don't want to set yourself up to make things more complicated than they need to be.
Well said. I think we're still in the hype cycle for sure. It's the old adage about everybody is talking about doing it, everybody else thinks everyone else is doing it, but no one's really doing it well. What I would recommend is that you have to start first asking the right questions. And AI is very seductive. You can get seduced into different tools. The question that I try to answer is, how am I intentionally listening to my customer base? Where are the insights coming from? What are they telling me in not so many words that I have to pick up on and improve the way I deliver value? Because that's what it all comes down to. And so that's across the entire organization. So whatever you're setting up, to echo Steve, let's not make a silo, but it's very tempting to go pick the next tool and just start, but think about the end in mind. Yeah. What we're trying to do here is to get better at quickly anticipating what our customer wants and then effectively delivering that across the org. So that would be my advice. I do think we're in the hype cycle, but there's still amazing work being done. There's real work being done, and you've seen some of that evidence today. I would say go jump right in and create an environment where it's okay to fail. So it's about experimentation. It's about testing your hypotheses and really getting going, because there's no perfect time. There's no perfect data. There's no perfect time. You've always got something going on. It's time to start now.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, there is no perfect data. You're right. But please try to find one set of imperfect data instead of 30 sets of imperfect data. That will help you tremendously. So if you're all working, that's why, again, if you're sitting on top of the CRM, then you don't have different data than your sales team has. And then you wonder, why can't we get our sales team and our support teams to talk to one another? I don't know, they're working off entirely different data sets. That seems dumb. So let's not make things harder than they need to be.
Can I offer a tip?
Please.
All right, one useful tip, because when I was driving this change of killing the term post-sales, people didn't know what to put instead of it. So what has worked for me are 2 examples: customer growth or customer experience. Pick one, stick to it, and actively take out wherever you see post-sales.
So as we think about customer growth then,
yes,
and recognizing that we are still very much in a hype cycle and waiting for these practices to come to fruition, for technology to catch up with us and be able to better serve us from a workflow standpoint, what is working from a practice standpoint? You mentioned you have to ask the right questions. Steve, you were talking about needing to sift through the data, avoid the 37 data points that you may be focusing on. How do we begin to identify what really is critical and help our teams better understand that at the end of the day?
I can go first here. There's a few things that matter from customer growth, especially if you're in a recurring revenue cycle, okay? And we talked about ownership. It turns out, in many ways, who's selling it and how they're selling it is less important than what they're selling. And so one of the key things we found is, do you have offers, or do you have specific things that people can sell that are designed for your existing customers? All right, we found that when CSMs are doing upsell, it can be done, but they can't go to enterprise sales if it's adding additional functionality, if it's adding additional seats, if it's adding additional capacity where it's the same budget, same buyer, they can do that. I'd even challenge you on customer experience that we're not here blending things together. The experience your customers want is that their problem is solved. And if that means that you have to sell them something else to get their problem solved, that's not evil. And that's a shift in mindset, but it's just a reality that they may not have been sold the right thing, they may have evolved. We can get them there, and it's not this salesy mindset. It's actually, that's part of the customer experience.
And that's a topic I really wanted to get into as well. Is clearly none of this is happening in vacuums or in individual silos. We know what the results of those can look like. How do you then begin to help flip that mindset for somebody who might be so ingrained in a particular role? Is it the right role? Is it the right skill set? Or is it also a training and enablement component that comes along with that?
Yeah, I also want to touch on that last question you asked. I think what's working, in my view, has been personalization at scale. I think finally with this intelligence gathering at scale, we can reach out with the right message and get the right insights. So I see us doing a better job of reaching out to the right customer, to the right buyer with exactly the right message. And I'm seeing us get exactly the right insights from the support interactions, their customer success interactions at scale back. So that's really encouraging. In terms of learning how to operate in this new world. So first of all, it's up to us as leaders to allow people to learn, right? So one of the rituals we used to have at a company I worked at, Miro, was Friday failures. And anybody would show up and say, hey, I tried this experiment, didn't work, but I learned these things. And what you do with this is you let people feel comfortable picking up a new skill. So to me, if people are trying to figure out how to sell, I think you have to take away that burden of trying to be a sales rep and understand that selling is all about value exchange. So if we can articulate the value, you can be an engineer, you can be a customer success manager, you can be anybody, and you can drive that sale forward. Do you have to do all of it? Probably not. You may not want to do all of it, you may not want to do the negotiation, but you absolutely have the opportunity and the responsibility if you want to go to market to take that value forward and to be part of the team conveying the value to the customer. That is ultimately selling. And we used to lionize sales in a different way, I think, in the past. Those days are gone. People don't buy that way. People buy on trust. They're buying on value. And I think anybody can do that, as long as we know our stuff and we have empathy for what we are selling.
Yeah, we have a lot of attendees in the audience today that are heavily focused from the support organization and operating under that type of model. Steve, from your perspective, I'm curious, how do you enable those organizations, not only from speaking about the mindset component of here, but look at it from the perspective that support, those individuals who may have that mindset of support isn't revenue oriented, we still are operating a bit under that cost center?
I don't think anybody, look, cost centers are under pressure, guys, and we all know that. And if we're not showing profit, it's going to be harder and harder to justify budgets. It's going to be harder and harder to justify what you're going to do. A few things. One, there are some skills that are involved, right? And just making sure, and they don't have to be hard sales skills. I don't know how you feel about this, Sangeeta, but to me, do you have soft skills? Do you have people skills? And do you have the ability to have that conversation, dig a level deeper? Do you have the customer data to allow them to have an intelligent conversation? And then, this is really important, once you've had that conversation, do you know what you do with that data? Okay. The lead screen in your Salesforce is not the place for it, because it's built to this Byzantine sales code of Bant and Medpic and everything else, and that there's nothing you're going to put in there. But it's just a matter of enabling the people with some skills, some confidence, and then putting the systems in place for them to have an intelligent discussion and know what you do with it when you find that discussion. And then it's actually doable.
Yeah, and I think the second part to that is we've probably got to change the way we measure support and incentivize support. Yes. If we're still talking about CSAT on tickets and mean time to resolve and first call resolution, and again, archaic things, right? Are they important? Absolutely. If that doesn't work, that's like the plumbing. You realize it's not working when it stops working. But on top of that, are we thinking about what insights are we getting from customers? Because when you have a ticket and you see the tickets being closed, this is not a feature that's available. Can that support rep actually think about maybe it is available, just not in this? And so this now becomes a conversation with the account manager to say, perhaps it's an upgrade, perhaps it's a consultative engagement, but it's up to us to think about what are we goaling people on so they now aspire to becoming a different organization and then giving them the room to learn.
I'd love to click into that one layer deeper here. If we do look at it from a metrics standpoint, what are the KPIs, the attributes that customer growth and customer experience can come together to really form a true internal revenue growth engine and partnership?
Yeah, I land on net revenue retention. I think it's very simple. It's easily understood. Everybody knows it's critical. You have to think of retention and expansion at the same time. Maybe overly simplified, but at the end of the day, it unites everybody. It'll unite you with the board, with your shareholders, so you're safe with that. But that's a very lagging metric. So I think where our job becomes the job that it is, and this is why the leaders in this room are paid the big dollars, is how do you break that down into understanding leading metrics? And how are we helping people drive those leading metrics?
Yeah, I do think if you're really moving from support to CX, then there's some changes that I think need to be made on metrics. I think you got to look at handle time. Do you want somebody to have an exploratory conversation with a client? Okay, with a customer, then if you're going to measure them and goal them and promote them based on handle time, I wouldn't have that conversation. Would you? Probably not, no matter how much it benefited my organization. So it is something to think about when you move from that assembly line process to something that's more along the lines of creating the right customer experience, which is getting them to the right thing. It may force you to re-examine some of the metrics that you've built, and in many cases, built our careers on.
So we'll wrap up here with one kind of last lightning round question for the two of you. And we've talked a lot about different topics, different metrics, different models, a lot to consume. If you were offering some guidance and advisement to a CX leader today, and they were looking to show how they can begin to drive revenue into their organization from a customer experience standpoint, and we'll kill the saying of post-sales here. What would be something that the one thing that they could do to start and actually begin to implement that next quarter?
I'll go first so that Sangeeta can have the last word.
Yes.
I like it.
Yeah, she's going to end this for us. I'll give you a couple of them, okay? First of all, don't just think about what you know about the customer in terms of what you have in your system, all right? And that's why I hate silos so much, right? We're working with a customer that's doing AI for legal, right? And so they're having a real hard problem with they didn't have the information flowing over from sales into support and CS. So instead of, first they're having all these fights with sales, right, as to why aren't you giving us this information? Now we just changed it and we created a system where they're using Copilot and Gong, and they don't even really have to ask sales what's going on. It just comes into their system. All right, so it's part of it is working together, but that's to me where AI can really improve those efficiencies is what do you know already? And how can that, to your point about that personalized conversation, just get there? But don't have them do a bunch of stuff. Like Maryland, I worked with Denise Rundle on a pilot on Steer's worldwide support organization where they just talked about, we didn't train on everything, but when you'd heard this prompt, this conversation, they were able to say, okay, this is what we do. And then last thing for me is, and I heard somebody else say this, and it's a real word of wisdom that I wanted to pass on to you guys, is that in this world of AI and agents, your people have to be better than your bots. And so that means that when you do get escalated to a human, there's a reasonable expectation that human is going to be able to solve your problem. So that means that the people you do have, I think you have to invest in them because it's going to be, they get to that person, oh my God, I'm finally talking to a person, and if the person's the same as the bot, then that's a bad experience.
So I'd say the one thing I would recommend that people do if you're in support is show up as a revenue leader. Don't show up as a support leader. And do the homework that it takes to actually understand revenue metrics, have that conversation with the person who owns the number, and see how you can partner. Because you have so much to give. If all you're thinking about is tickets, you're doing yourself a disservice because you have so much more. And kill those silos and show up as a revenue leader, and you'll be treated as such.
Fantastic insights. Thank you both, Steve, Sangeeta. I'd say if there's really one element to take away from this panel, and I'd say the previous panel did a great job of tying this into the topic as well, it's that CX is no longer just about solving customer issues at the end of the day. It's indeed about finding those signals that really do fuel that growth for the organization. Start small, one signal, one motion, one solution, tie it to revenue and outcomes. That's how you're going to build the trust, the alignment, and the loyalty that's ultimately going to drive that revenue for the organization at the end of the day. So I want to say again, thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for giving us some of the time here, and enjoy lunch.